This is 2 Minutes Together, a ministry of Central Lutheran Church, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Pastor Ben. This week in our gospel lesson, we have a very familiar passage when the Pharisees ask Jesus, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus' conclusion, after asking to see a denarius, is whose image is it on the denarius, that Jesus says famously, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. There's been a lot of different ways of thinking about that in the past, and I'm sitting next to two of the most obvious. Sometimes this becomes a conversation of what do Lutherans think of civic society and obligation to live in the civil world. Or it becomes a conversation about stewardship, about what is it that we're giving and how do we relate with money. And those topics are meaningful, but I wonder if there's another aspect as well. And if, in fact, Jesus is actually doing something different. Because, see, it says multiple times in the text they were trying to deceive Jesus and trap Jesus into saying something. And Jesus calls them out on that, calling them hypocrites. And I wonder if, in fact, he's deliberately not answering the question. That is, I do think Jesus stewardship is an important part in Jesus' ministry. So is the relationship between Christians and government. But here, I wonder if the focus isn't about that at all, but is instead about give to God what is God's. You're coming to me and talking to me about these issues about empire and minutiae and different aspects, but are you giving to God what is God's? Instead of answering the question, he challenges them with a new one. And what is giving God what is God's? After all, is there anything that are Caesar's that aren't God's eventually? But giving God what is God's. Our relationship with God. That does indeed encompass everything, but not just everything vaguely, but everything about our lives, in our communities. Who are we before God? How are we being made right before God? How are we brought into the fold of the body of Christ? Remember, Jesus here in chapter 22 is going to be very soon into Jerusalem and is heading into Passion Week, saying there's a new way to relate to God. For us in our whole selves to give to God what is God's. This aspect of this passage is not nearly as well understood or as well commented upon. But I think it's something that resonates in our lives today. How are we daily giving to God what is God's? How are we receiving the grace from God? How are we in relationship with God at all times? This is 2 Minutes Together. I'm Pastor Ben.